Hello everyone, I'm Raleigh and welcome to the channel. So if you guys don't know who I am, I'm a small content creator. I do stream over on Twitch as well, but I'm one of the smaller people. I'm not partnered with ArenaNet, and that's kind of the reason why I like to make these videos. If you guys are new to the channel, welcome. I do usually like lore stuff. Usually I talk about fun facts and I do like theory videos, and I just look at like the weird little nuanced things, the like niche things that are in the game. ArenaNet pays a huge attention to detail most of the time, at least, and I kind of bring that to the forefront most of the time. So I figured, as always, with these studio updates, and we have a train coming through, so you might hear that. But with the studio update, I've been doing the last few times, I've been doing videos on that, and I think I like to do this because I feel like a little bit of a different opinion than some of the big content creators and the people that are like partnered with ArenaNet. So I like to just kind of give my opinion as someone that's more on the like casual side of things, that doesn't raid, that doesn't do like, I do raid once in a blue moon, but I don't concentrate on like end game focus. I don't have a huge guild that I'm a part of. I don't have a huge community that kind of is part of my everyday experience of Guild Wars. I'm more of a solo player. I'm more focused on the characters and the story and the lore and the weird, nuanced things, niche things. And so that's kind of why I want to do this and give you guys my opinion about what I think about the different things that ArenaNet is doing. So that's kind of the premise of the video. And if you guys haven't seen any of my stuff, go check it out. I have comparison streams with Guild Wars 1 and 2 that I make. I'm eventually going to continue that series, but it's pretty much I play both games at the same time, and I go around in the same places on Tyria, and I compare the two of them, how they have changed. I talk about the lore. I do YouTube shorts for like fun facts. I have a couple of videos on like specific animal facts. There's actually 3 videos on that. So all kinds of stuff that deals with like theories and fun facts and what's to come next and like those types of things. So if you guys haven't checked that out, I would really appreciate that. And make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like content like that. And yeah, so let's get into it. Let's kind of review the studio update, and I'll give you guys my opinion. I'll try not to make it super long, but I do usually get on like rants and tangents and stuff like that. So I'm sorry if that is not your cup of tea, but yeah, so let's get right into it and let's kind of see what ArenaNet is planning on doing and that type of stuff. So alright, so here we are. So we have the studio update, spring 2023. So hello commanders, welcome to the latest installment of the ArenaNet studio update, your go-to resource for Guild Wars 2 development news. This sounds like, I don't know, this sounds like a weird like news anchor, like something that they would say, right? Today we'll address some community questions regarding our announcement back in February, blah blah blah. Share an updated roadmap. I have a lot of thoughts on that as well. Once we get to the roadmap, I'll let you guys know, because there's something that's really interesting, which is complete 180 to everything else that I think about this. So let's kind of get into it. So let's do content model Q&A. In our February studio update, we outlined some changes that we're making in our development approach that allows us to deliver new content, features, and core game updates more consistently. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, for those of you that are new to Guild Wars 2, or maybe that haven't really kept up with it and stuff, this is a line that they, every few years, literally, I will tell you guys, every few years, they will deliver that exact line, where they say that they're implementing systems, or they're doing changes to their team, or they're making things happen in game to easier and more consistently bring game updates. I don't know what that means. It's such a broad, weird way. I guess in this time around they're talking about like the structure of it, how they're doing the mini expansions, and they're making away with like a living world, and they're kind of changing a little bit of their business model in that way as well, because like the living world is going away, which is like part of like, so to say, almost paid content if you're not, if you don't log in during that time. So I think that's what they're talking about this time. Most of the time I think when they talked about this stuff, it was more things like behind the scenes where they would implement code into the game that made it easier. So one is like more of like the hardware and software side of it, where the other, now this is more of like conceptual, it's like how are we approaching the whole development and stuff like that. So I've been lost in Tangled Depths for 2 months with no cell service. Obviously, you can't get any cell service there because it's just like a mess, okay? So they're talking about how they're changing. They're trying to minimize content droughts, which is really funny that they're talking about this right now because I feel like we're somewhat of a content drought right now. The only, new release, and I'm talking about new release for us veteran players at least. The only new release we've gotten is been What Lies Beneath, and that's been it wasn't a bad release. As someone that likes the lore and as someone that's played Guild Wars 1 and that's, I've made 2 videos on the Jade Sea after Gala Delve release just because I was so excited to see where they would take it. I think that we're right now somewhat in a content drought, so that's kind of funny that they would say that, right? Or at least like a small content drought in sorts. Increases support for the core game, which is going to be a huge subject we're going to talk about later down this video. Rather than releasing an expansion every 2 to 4 years with 1 to 2 seasons of Living World in between, over releasing, so they've talked about this. They talk about exactly what they want to do. So they want to do new story, 2 open world maps, 2 strikes, new gameplay and combat features, which again is super vague and they don't give us any specifics on this. So it's kind of like, okay, give us a little bit more specifics, but they do talk about it a little bit later down the road, which again we have to infer a little bit on what they mean. New masteries, which is something that could be good for the game, could be bad. There are certain masteries that, when we look at mounts, the mounts themselves are great, but being part of the mastery system makes them a little... The mastery system doesn't add anything interesting to the mounts, I feel like. And I feel like that could have been a whole different system, the mount system. But there's been masteries in the game that I think are underutilized and that are actually really cool. Leyline gliding is something that's still somewhat utilized every so often, right? But we have those vines from like Draconis Mons, for example, that we haven't seen, right? I talk about this every so often where I feel like the mounts kind of took a huge chunk of what made Guild Wars 2 so unique and kind of took that away a little bit, right? Where we can skip over content. The reason why I make the videos that I make is because so much of the content can just be like just run through now. You can blast through most of the core content now just by having a raptor, right? And you miss all these really cool, like niche, like interesting details that they have in the world, right? This world building that they have created, and it's a shame. So I've always been a huge advocate for having maybe when new maps release, maybe not being able to use your mounts right away, and having to like unlock it in some way, just so you actually take your time to explore it and actually see everything instead of like rushing through it. Because I tell you what, there's a lot of stuff in this game that people are missing, and it's really cool, and I feel like it's world building to the point where that kind of makes the game feel larger and more interesting rather than just being a treadmill of like going through and like redoing the same content over and over again, running the same raids, running the same things, going back and maybe exploring that for yourself, right? Like, I don't know, where you can appreciate the game better, right? And new rewards, which is always something that's that's always something that new rewards is something that should always be on everyone's mind all the time, because it's a video game that, and we're looking, that's why we play, right? We want that, like, dopamine rush of, like, oh, we'll have a new treasure that I unlocked or whatever, right? So new rewards are always good. Quarterly updates will add, in the following quarterly updates, right? They're talking about quarterly updates. We'll add story chapters, additional open world, 1 additional open world map. So we'll get, per mini expansion, we'll get 3, right? We get 2 with the actual release and then 1 after the fact. Challenge modes. New fractal dungeon, which, thank God, I can't, I don't run fractals anymore. I will tell you guys, I do not run fractals. I have run fractals for many, many years on a daily basis, and I love fractals. I love them to death, but not having new fractals is really boring to me. I love the lore in fractals, I love the mechanics in fractals, I love the fights in the fractals, but just playing the same ones over and over and over and over again, it's just gotten really stale. So it's something that I'm really looking forward to. uh, additions to the new systems introduced in that expansion. So new systems, not sure that, because they're not saying masteries, so it's like new systems introduced. Do they really introduce many new systems? Like, I guess the mount system would be like a new system. The fishing and the skiffs would be probably a new system, right? So I don't know really specifically what they mean there, but nonetheless, new things. And depending on the release, new gameplay and combat features. So that's something, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Alongside these expansion contents, we're beefing up support for the core game. This is huge, guys. This is a huge thing that I've been talking about for many, many years, and we'll talk about that once we go. So we can iterate and improve on Guild Wars 2, even while releasing new expansions, blah, blah, blah. Okay, do small expansions. So right here they're saying they hired new people. They hired new people for content and systems design, which is great. Content design, that's always really good. I think that's something that's really dropped off, where I don't think necessarily, a lot of people have been kind of iffy about End of Dragons because they're like, well, the maps feel boring and there's no reason to go back and stuff. And I think that's specifically based on the content in the maps. I talked about this. I talk about this on my streams all the time, where I literally say, like, I'll go through New Canning City, right, or New Canning, or whatever you want to call it, and there's like, I have all these ideas where I'm like, oh man, I wish, like, one of the ideas that I had recently, I remember it was a stream like a week ago or something that I did, and I kind of went through like some of the canals, and and there's a ton of those canals, and I really said, I'm like, man, I wish there was like, because we have that synergetic skimmer mount that kind of, you can color that green to make it look kind of jade. And I was thinking, I'm like, man, it would be really cool if we had almost like speeder bike gangs driving around. Like, they could have the Jade Brotherhood, like in groups of 3 maybe, on these skimmer skins, right? Like going down the canals, and you have to use the lasso skill. They've used that a few times, where you have to like press the special action key in order to like, usually it's been like monsters that you kind of have to like lasso in or whatever and kind of slow them down, and then you can attack them. Like, kind of do the same thing maybe, where you have to like go on your skimmer and follow them, and you have to use that action, the special action key or something, or on your mount, or even on your skiff, right? You could even skiff, which is harder to navigate, but something like that, where you have to like stop them and then you go into combat with them or something like that. I don't know. That was like one of the ideas that would have made, I feel like, Canning City feels so much more interesting than what it is, right? So I don't know. To me, that kind of was that is what content design means. A lot of the events are really boring in End of Dragons, and I think that's what makes End of Dragons really, really boring, because every single event is just about defeating enemies. There's a couple events that are like unique, that are different, that feel special, that feel like, oh man, this is really cool, right? But it's like they're so far and few between that it doesn't really hold up. I talked about how I think the Grothmar Valley is so beloved by the community, but I think it is because of the variety of events that we have, right? We have the target practice thing, and we have the the flame effigy one, or we have all those different things that make it super unique as a map, right? That I think that's what makes people like really enjoy it. It's a beautiful map on top of having a lot of different content that plays very different, and it kind of like, you're not in this like autopilot mode of like, oh, I gotta go over here and defeat this enemy, and then, oh, I gotta go over here and defeat this enemy. No, like, I have to do different things because it's a different activity, and it kind of like changes how your brain works, I feel like. So, talking about a larger team, which is good. How does the shift result in more support for the core game? So let's talk about the core game, right? So let's read this and we'll talk about this. Let's start by defining the core game. Core is typically viewed as synonymous with the base Guild Wars 2 experience. Anything that doesn't require an expansion. Systems-wise, that's a huge chunk of the game. Core Tyria and the story up, which is weird. So they're saying Core Tyria and the story up to level 80. Core Tyria has a bunch of level 80 story missions, because once you hit ore, there's like, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out. There's like 10 missions after you hit level 80 that are like story, but I think they still mean like even that. I think they're talking about the core story, right? I think that's what they're talking about, the core Tyria and core story. World versus World, which is like a huge thing that we've been talking about for many, many years now at this point. Structured PvP, which I think is something that's been put on the back burner for a long time, and ArenaNet really needs to focus on that. Dungeons? Now that's interesting, right? They're including, they're just defining core game. They're not saying they're working on dungeons. I'm not saying that, right? They're just defining what the core game means. But that dungeons do get a mention is interesting, because I do think that dungeons deserve to get a little bit of quality of life, at least, if not actual new content. Fractals of the Mist, which they've already said that they're working on stuff. I mean, they've already told us up here that they're working on new fractals, so that's great. And crafting, which is, again, a core system. You know, the list goes on. There's a lot of other stuff that go into the core system. I think dynamic events is a huge one. That, you know, that system itself, dynamic events, was such a innovative thing that ArenaNet did. I feel like that no other game, no other MMO, as far as I know, has really captured that the core of what dynamic events are. Like, no one has captured that like ArenaNet. ArenaNet is still like on top of that. And I think if they really look at like how can we improve this, and you know, on this innovation that they've already had and innovate on top of that, I think they can make some really good stuff with that happen. I don't have any specific ideas now, but I think they can come up with some good stuff. Supporting in the context of supporting the live game and our new development strategy, core also encapsulates a long list of content and features. You know, the quality of life stuff that they've introduced. We've introduced, they said when we introduce new features, blah 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 blah. That they have, yeah. So they're kind of talking about how they even introduce stuff in like the new expansions, but they do deal, you know, they bring those. So like the mounts were introduced in Path of Fire, but they brought those into core Tyria. So I think that they're kind of thinking of mounts as a core system, just because it's so integrated into the base game, even if you don't necessarily have you know, that you know, they don't necessarily consider them like part of the core game, obviously, because they're saying anything that doesn't require an expansion, but they're such a part of the core game. Like, that's why they're letting the raptors, right? The raptors are kind of like now become core game, like a core game system, which kind of brings the mounts a little bit into the core game system. So that I think they're kind of trying to blend the two together, so that when they make certain updates to like a system, that they really can say, you know, we're making an update to the mount system, and it doesn't just affect the people that own Path of Fire or End of Dragons, right? It affects everyone, because now, you know, maybe at some point you're able to earn all of your mount skins through the core game, right? Which, am I for that? Maybe. I don't know if it's implemented correctly. Like, you have to be level 80 to get mounts. Like, I'm still iffy on mounts. I love the mounts, trust me, don't get me wrong. I love the mounts. I absolutely love, I have a bunch of skins and I love running around on them, but I just think the core experience was never meant to have them. And I think, like I said, it kind of, a lot of people rush past a lot of content that is really, really good because they have mounts. So I'm kind of torn between the two, but, you know, we'll see. Skewed more towards addition rather than iteration. And they say iteration, which is kind of weird, which, you know, it's such a weird word, because I'm like, you're looking, you know, deserve iteration, and then iteration again here. So they're kind of like, they want to look at core systems and maybe not change them, but like, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. They're like, oh, we need to make a new iteration of the system. Like, okay, what does that mean, right? But yeah, so this is something that I think has been, for a long time, has been a really good thing, that they've been moving towards adding new content. I think the core game was great, but then we had, like, for many years, there was just, like, content droughts, and there wasn't, like, new things added to the game. And then for the next, like, you know, after they realized that, and after they realized that they had kind of not added new content, not enough new content for people to really keep busy, you know, and keep playing the game. they started just focusing on that. And that's been for the last like 8 years, like 6 to 8 years, I want to say. It's been the sole focus of just adding new content. And I'm at the point where I'm like, oh my god. That's why I'm like kind of sick and tired of meta maps, right? Because we have so many of those meta focused maps, and even the new ones don't really compare to like the old ones. Like Auric Basin is still one of the best ones to run. Like, you run that meta, you can run that over and over again, and you're doing pretty good, right? And you don't really need to play other ones. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's become to the point where it's like, this is a huge focus. I'm like, you need to go back, though. Power creep has been a huge thing. So they really, they need to go back, and that's what I've been saying. They need to go back and look at the content from years ago that's now just been left behind because they've just been focusing on going forward, right? So I like that they're looking, and they're saying it's not a bad thing by default, and it wasn't. Like I said, the content was lacking in the beginning, so adding new content was great. But after like 6 to 8 years, it's kind of like, okay, enough, like kind of slow down a little bit, right? And there's ways that you can look, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but there's ways that you can improve the core game and even entice your veteran players to go back to that. I've talked about recently about how I think that we should not exclusively add level 80 maps. I think if we go back to Quarteria and add some, like a level 35 map here and a level like 65 map here and a level 50 map over here or whatever, right? I think that's not a bad thing. It's just the way that you implement that, right? Entice your veteran players to go in there as well and help out the new players, right? But not in a way that it disrupts the new player experience. So again, it's very tough to kind of balance that a little bit, but I feel like that would be so much, because the goal should be to entice people that are playing the core game that is free to play, right, up to level 80, to go and actually purchase the expansions. But I think that a lot of people that are new to the game, that maybe aren't part of the community, that aren't watching videos online, they don't understand that the core game isn't really what Guild Wars 2 is now. There's been so many changes over the years that have changed the game, that the core game doesn't really reflect that anymore. And I think bringing the core game up to what the expansion maps now feel like is probably a good idea, because then people get really a feel for, like, they're really like, oh my god, this is really good. Because hands down, I think the expansion maps are better than the core maps. While the core maps are still really good, I think the expansion maps just, Arena has kind of learned over the years, and they've kind of, most after expansion maps are just, they're just better. The rewards are better, the systems are better, the dynamic events probably are better too, so I think bringing the core up to that standard would be really good. Let's move on here. So they kind of talk about what they want to do. They want to, they want a long-term support for this community, right? They want to support the game for a long time. They've talked about this. They talk about how they gotta, they kind of take care of old code, which is good, because we've heard about this a long time. They haven't really talked about this in a while, but there's been, over the years, you can kind of go back, and spaghetti code has been something that's really plagued ArenaNet, and I think that's what's really been messing up a lot of new content that's come out, because some of the code is just really, really old, right? It's using an engine from, like, 2005 or whatever, right? So it's like an 80-year-old engine with, like, old code and, like, whatever, right? I don't know how this all works, but I feel like some of that is interfering with some of the new stuff. So going back and maybe, like, figuring this out, refactoring large swaths of old code, like, I don't know, whatever that means, but optimizing development tools, future-proofing world versus world. Yeah, that's super important. We got to do this, updating our engine. So they kind of go to talk about what they've done over the last year, which some of the stuff, I'm like, okay, you're just like patting yourself on the back for like something that you should have done for a long time. I'm not saying that it's not a good change, and I'm not trying to bitch, but it just seems like when you look at like a new Super Adventure Boss map, I'm like, yeah, it's been like 9 years, what, 10 years since you've added a new map. Good job, ArenaNet. right? Like, not, I love the new map, don't get me wrong. World 3, I'm super happy, but saying like, oh, look at this, we did this, yeah, okay, well, it's a little bit of a bittersweet thing when you think about it, you know. It's like, yeah, well, you should have had that like a few years ago, you know. So but yeah, some of the stuff is really good. Emboldened mode, I think, is awesome. I myself tried it out the other day. I was with a training group recently, and Emboldened mode, and it was fun. Like I said, I don't raid on the regular. I don't. You know, I can probably on, you know, two hands count how many times I've done raids. Yeah, but Emboldened mode is great. Visuals and mechanics for the world bosses. Visuals, they changed visuals. I think they did. On some stuff. I don't know how they changed visuals, but because there's some of the world bosses where I'm like, man, I wish I had a new model, you know, like the one in Wayfarer Foothills. I forgot the shaman or whatever. I know they updated that model, but like there's some stuff I feel like that they could like make it feel more epic. I don't know. It doesn't really feel that epic to me, but you know, I don't know. Again, changes to core is always good. So Return to Living World Season 1, that was really good. Steam launch, I'm sure probably has increased their player numbers by, you know, a lot. Key bindings, like, you know, you're patting yourself on the back for making updated default key bindings settings for new players. Okay, great. You know, it's things like that where I'm like, yeah, you did that. I don't know how much work that took. And I don't know if that's something you want to be like, yeah, we did that. That was great. It is, again, it is good to make certain things work. And, you know, I always like seeing updates to the game, right? But, you know, just kind of highlighting that as a little high contrast mouse cursors. Even though that might look like another one of these, I really do enjoy that, and I really do. I'm like, yes, we have high contrast mouse cursors, because I did not want to install extra stuff. My sister installed the thing where you get like the giant like color, and it's so irritating. Every time I like look on like her computer and she like plays, and it's like this giant red mouse that moves around, I'm like, wow, that is so literally immersion completely gone. I'm like, I just can't handle it. This one was really good. I actually do like this change, not being, you know, ejected from the instance. That's really nice. World vs. World. Yeah, that's still lacking. They promised some stuff that they still haven't. You know, they talked about like, oh, World vs. World betas are going to be happening in the like first, you know, half of the year, and they haven't happened. So it's like, I'm pretty sure they said first half of the year, right, of 2023, and you know, like, yes, they did quality of life improvement and reward updates, but a lot of it didn't. It kind of backfired too, you know. So that's a bittersweet thing again there. Bank access, that is amazing. Oh my god, I've used that myself a ton. I'm like, ooh, I don't use the Mystic Forge that often, but it does really good. Improvement to the new player experience, like the Raptor thing, I think was one of those. Which again, bittersweet. You know, I'm not huge on the Raptor, but you know, I know that's what the veterans always push for. The veterans always push, oh yeah. Go do the first, when you're level 80, go do the first mission of Path of Fire and get your Raptor, and then go back into the core world. It's like, why? We played for like 6 years without a mount. You don't need mounts in the core game. You know what I mean? Have them play the game like regular. Like, at least the core game. When they go into, like, Heart of Thorns even, like, once they go into those maps, like, yeah, have a Raptor. Because I think the maps are big enough, and there is enough to do that, like, Raptors wouldn't really interrupt in the actual way that the game plays. But the core maps are so flat, and just like a flat surface where you can just sprint across everywhere, that you just kind of skip over everything. Oh, wardrobe and die randomizer option. Kind of, again, I don't know how huge of a, like, development, like, involvement this was, like how much time they had to invest to make this happen. It's cute, it's funny, you know, it's something that kind of like, yeah, passion, you know, whatever. And I've gotten some really fun, I've done on stream some randomizations, and I'm like, oh, that looks kind of cool, you know. So it's not bad, not a bad thing. This is nice. You know, Blackline, as someone that does buy Blackline chest keys every so often to get some of the you know, new shoulders and new weapons and, you know, the little things that you can get in there. I do like that I can get a lot of stuff out of that. Mega server map queues. I have not myself actually tried this out. I haven't really been in maps that needed it, so it's not something that I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I don't know. Allied player visual filtering. Spoiler. You know, they're kind of saying that as like, this is something that we've already done. You haven't done this yet, so but and more. But yeah. Anyways, we worked with fractal mislog. Shouldn't that be capitalized? I think that should be, because they always capitalize fractal. Is that something in a little over a year? Isn't it in little over a year? Anyways, those teams delivered a significant, yeah. So they right here, I mean delivered, like past tense, right? And they're talking about this. This has not been delivered yet. So I don't know. Anyways, still a good list. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff. Like, even with my nitpicking, there is good stuff in there, guys. There is really good stuff in there. And it, you know, this is something, so I kind of, the first time I read through this, that was something that really stuck out to me, because people talk about like maintenance mode, right? And like games that are like on their, you know, at the end of their lifespan or whatever. I think that the idea of them actually introducing new systems and, you know, reworking old things and doing little nuanced things, like even doing like updated default key bindings and stuff like that, like really, you know, that's stuff that no one would even think about, really, like, you know, whatever. I think really shows that we're far away from maintenance mode. They're doing all these weird, like, I think the steps of, like, you know, there's like 3 steps, or, you know, 3 phases of like phasing out or whatever, right? You have the regular where, like, you know, this happens, right? Update for everything happens, right? They're updating the content, they're updating systems, and they're updating mechanics, and they're updating code, and they're updating engine, and they're updating all the graphical things, and setting things, and blah blah blah, right? That kind of shows that active development, not just on content, right, and but like on all the things behind the scenes and all the things that are part of the game, right? And then the next step, I think this is where a lot of people like are like, ooh, maintenance mode, right? When you only focus on content, right? I think games that move over to, instead of looking at all the things in the back end where it's like, you know, the settings and the integration into, you know, new systems, new mechanics, blah blah blah, that stuff, and then just go to new content and make new content. I think that's the first step into maintenance mode, and I think that some people kind of confuse that a little bit, where, you know, ArenaNet focuses so much on content where like, oh, it's in maintenance mode. It's like, no, that's like kind of how ArenaNet does it, but they still work on things in the background, you know. I think we're far from maintenance mode, especially with all the things that we've seen over the last year. I think we're far away from maintenance mode, guys. I think that like, whether or not they're working on other games in the background, they're really planning on keeping this game around for like a long time still. There's still much left to do. We have a lot of pride in our work, which is always good to have, right? There's an infinite list of things. Always. On a big game like Godosu, there's a ton of stuff. And their team isn't that massive that they can, you know, really look at all of those things. Constraints, yeah, so there's development resources are finite. There's some constraints. So what they're pretty much saying is they're not going to be changing every little thing in games, right? They're not going to change every little thing that, you know, every core system. They're not going to look at every little thing, which is understandable, you know, and maybe some of these are just not important enough to really look at. Totally understandable. Combat features, right? And so here they're addressed like the giant elephant in the room when we're talking about the mini expansions, because nowhere are elite specializations. So they literally say in this first paragraph, and I'm just gonna like kind of pretty much no elite specializations, because they think that there's no more room or uniqueness in the way that like an elite specialization would be. So they think that if they add like a new elite specialization to each class, for each profession or class or whatever you want to call them, that it would feel like one of the other ones and it wouldn't be unique enough. And they you know, it says that for each like profession already exists or should exist within their existing. So which I like. I think as a community, I feel like most of us agree that that is a good change. I think just looking at what you have and changing, we have so many. Like, I'm currently working on a video series that actually kind of talks about each elite specialization a little bit. But it's kind of, there's so many out there, right? We have 3 options for each one, and you also have core, right? In some instances, core even works. Like core guardian, for the longest time, I don't even know if it still is, but in PvP was like widely used, you know what I mean? And it's core, it wasn't even elite specialization. So you have pretty much 4 options for each profession that you can go into, and then even within those you have options of doing different roles, right? Because you can, like, some have like Condi or power or Condi support, or you're doing just support or whatever, right? I don't know what all the different roles are. Again, I don't really rate that much, but there's different options within each of those. So it's kind of like they're like, rather than creating new ones where, we're kind of maybe repeating certain things, we want to look at what we can do. So this is one of the most interesting parts, honestly, of this. With our next expansion, our goal is to further augment the combat options. And when I was reading this, I'm like, this is a lot of bullshit for not giving us a lot of information. Like, there's a lot of, like, theory crafters are going to be very busy. Am I going to be very busy? You're not giving me a lot of ideas, okay? And I'm one of the theory crafters, mostly for lore and stories, but I do like to talk about weapons and specializations and combat mechanics and, what I would like to see. So you're gonna have to give me a little bit more than that, because it says, with our expansion, our goal is to further augment the combat options for each profession by adding new tools to the arsenal and by lifting constraints that will unlock an unprecedented number of playstyle customization options, while keeping the feel of Guild Wars 2 combat true to its origins. Theory crafters are going to be very busy. So what they're pretty much saying, augment the combat options for each profession, meaning they're trying to expand the options that each profession, like, they're trying to add to the options that each profession has by adding new tools to their arsenal, by lifting constraints that will unlock a number of... So this right here to me reads, by adding new weapon choices, we're lifting constraints on all the other, or on other weapon choices, maybe even, lifting constraints. What's if we're talking about weapons, like tools, what would be new tools? New tools I see as weapons, right? I see that as, again, we have to infer a lot of stuff, but I think I look at, what are tools in combat that you use as a profession, right? We're talking about combat options. By professions, we use weapons. Those are our tools of combat, right? But what are some tools that are constrained? Well, underwater weapons. Those are constrained to underwater, right? So maybe they're kind of like giving us a little, like, underwater weapons are something that we're at least thinking about maybe bringing on land, right? Which is something that the community has talked about since, like, before the first expansion release. So I would love to see it. Specifically Trident is something where I'm like, man, Trident could have, like, a lot of really cool, because people talk about this all the time, where the melee staff options that we have right now are mostly with, like, where you kind of there's a lot of swipe action, right? Which is like, that's why scythe skins work a lot, because you, like, swipe with them, right? But there's no, like, spear where you stab, right? So the spear underwater, right, and the trident underwater kind of could take that place, where I think the spear underwater could be, you bring that on land, and that's like more of a physical, like, just spear in your face, and the trident could be like a magical spear. So a lot of the magic users maybe could use trident on land, maybe even with, like, long range options, but they kind of can have, like, the whole stabbing. Like, there's not a lot of stabbing, right? When you think about that, like, that's why I think some of the spear skins don't really work that much, because it's like, there's a lot of swiping with melee staff rather than stabbing. So I would, again, that's something I would like to see. Will unlock an unprecedented number of playstyle customization options. So they're really looking, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit too, because there's two things actually that I mentioned where I'm like, oh, thank God. So they're pretty much saying that they're looking to make elite specializations be able to take different roles in combat. That's pretty much all they're saying. And I think they're also talking about something that I've talked about. I think rather than adding new elite specializations, give us more core weapons, right? Specifically, we talk about, and talk about this all the time. I love Revenant, but I can't play Revenant because I'm a type of person, I enjoy more of the long range. I think I want, I don't know. The close range options that Revenant has, I'm not super huge on. I do like dual swords. That's kind of fun to me, but again, it doesn't. I'm like, I wish there was more long range options. The only one we have for core is Hammer, and Hammer sucks. At least for PvE, which, you know, open world PvE is pretty much what I play. It kind of sucks, right? It's slow, it's a little, you know. So I'm like, adding some core weapons, you know, specifically not for elite specializations, but just for core, because it would expand it so much more than actually adding an elite specialization. Because if, let's say, we're adding a longbow to the Revenant, right? We will be able to use it on a Renegade, we'll be able to use it on a Vindicator, or we're able to use it on a Herald, right? So those 5 new weapon skills can really change up the whole way, like the way that this whole profession plays. And the builds that you can make, right? You can make that like a long range, like you know, condition damage, right? Beside like beside doing the short bow, right? Because we have short bow on Renegade. So maybe having a condition herald. I don't know. I'm just throwing out random stuff now. I don't know if that would actually be feasible, but you know, there's new playstyles that we could have if we implement new core weapons. So would be really cool. I would love to see a long range trident on land for Revenant. I think that would be amazing. Because I do, the trident was one of the ones that they introduced during the Path of Fire time, I think. I'm pretty sure. And that was, you know, to the Revenant, I mean, as an underwater option. And I love it. It's one of my favorite, like, weapon sets to even use. Like, obviously it's such a niche because it's underwater, and underwater combat has not seen any real use in a long time, but you know, I love that. I love that, like, each legend that you kind of channel gives you different abilities on your weapons and stuff. I think that has like huge, like, that's something that's so unique to the Revenant that they could implement a system like that for all of the weapons for Revenant. But just alone bringing the exact same, they can even use the exact same kit on the weapon and bring it on land, and it would be a fantastic long-range weapon. I think would be really cool, really fun to use. So you know, that's something. So they're kind of talk about, so what they're addressing right here, they're kind of, the question is, how does the What Lies Beneath quarterly release differ from the future expansions quarterly releases? So they're kind of saying, why does What Lies Beneath suck so much? Because it wasn't really, a lot of people have been like about it, right? What Lies Beneath was very small. People played through in like an hour and a half, or like that's it, you know. The map is meta based. There's not that much detail to the map. Like, there is details in the map, but there's not like little things that you can explore. There's not like I don't know. There's a lot of detail, I feel like, in the sense of like content, and even the achievements don't really feel like other content releases where it's like, oh, it really makes you dive back into the map, right? Being a meta based map as well is kind of, it's something that I don't enjoy, because you do that meta maybe like for 2 weeks every freaking day, and then you're done. You're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I have all the rewards that I want. I have all the achievement points that I want. I'm done. I don't want to play this anymore, and it becomes boring, you know? So, again, you know, and the events within it are also very boring. There's not a lot of variety to the events that are happening in there. So, you know, so they're kind of like, why is this, you know, how's this different? So what they're kind of saying here, so let's kind of go through. Beginning with the 4th expansion, there will be new content updates every 3 to 4 months. So that's something they've already talked about. For context, there was no new release between the release of End of Dragons and then a year after. So there was, for a whole year, there was no new content. It was just older content that they were trying to bring up, right? But that's because the team worked on the expansion up until its release. So we do see a little bit of crunch in some of the maps. Again, I talked about the events within the maps. People talk about New Kaineng being very empty. I talk about what else they could add in there. Echo Vault is okay, kind of feeling empty. Dragon's End isn't bad. I do like Dragon's End, but there's stuff that they could have improved, but that's because they worked up until its release on it, delaying new content development until a month or two later. So the fourth expansion, so this is really cool, and I'm like, whoa, I'm actually impressed. So the reason, but again, it's bittersweet. So they're saying right here, the fourth expansion hasn't even been officially revealed yet, but we're already making headway in its quarter release content, meaning the release that comes after the initial expansion release. They're already working on the next release after that. Does that mean they're already done with the expansion? Absolutely not. I don't think so. But they're probably saying that, whatever team is working, the map artists, let's say, right? They probably have already made the 2 maps for the mini expansion, and they're now moving on to making the new map for the release that comes after. And that's really cool to think that they've already finished that much, that they can work on new. Because if they're done with that, they can maybe go back and help the other people out, or maybe refine a little bit of the map that is going to come with the expansion, right? Maybe there's a little bit of leeway on their workload, where they can kind of oh, okay, we can kind of shift back now and make it even better, right? And then once it releases, it's really, really good, even better than anything that comes before, right? This is one of the biggest reasons we're excited about this transition. Now, it's a little what does it say? Additionally, as we laid out earlier in this blog post, will be augmented by other types of content and feature updates that are not included. Okay, whatever. That's, they're just adding other types of content and feature updates that aren't included. We already know this. I mean, we haven't seen. They're saying that this hasn't happened for End of Dragons, but they're trying to do pretty much more significant quarterly updates. They're pretty much saying that What Lies Beneath is not a perfect example of what the next one will be, because they're already thinking about augmenting that, the What Lies Beneath release of the next expansion with something, with more things, with more types of content and feature updates. So kind of improving that, or kind of saying that that is not exactly how it's going to be. It's kind of the same content cadence, release cadence, but not the way that it actually is going to be presented in the content itself. But this is a little bittersweet, because what this tells me is that we know that Icebird Saga got kind of cut off at the end because they were focusing on End of Dragons, right? And they're doing the same thing, and that's why the Champions release of Icebird Saga kind of sucked, because they, everything kind of dropped off. We know about Primordius kind of, nonchalantly kind of, being killed and all that stuff. But it's just kind of they're doing the same thing here, so it's a little bittersweet, right? I'm trying to look at it in a balanced way and a little bit more objectively than just saying oh my god, well, the new release is gonna be great. Well, you're kind of cutting off, right? They were like, well, What Lies Beneath kind of sucked because we're already working on the next thing. Well, I'm like, well, you had a year for What Lies Beneath, and it kind of sucked. Well, we'll talk about What Lies Beneath actually down there on May 23rd. But it kind of is okay, you kind of made it suck because you're working on something else. Okay, and it's you had a year to work on that. That's what it feels like, at least. That they're saying oh yeah, but we're already working on the next release after the new expansion, but then the release you just had wasn't that great. So it's you gotta balance that a little bit. You can't constantly cut what you're doing right now because you're thinking about the future, right? You can't constantly do that. You can't always be like, well, but what about the next expansion? What about the new content release? Well, what about the thing you're working on right now? That's also important, because that's going to be the thing that they're going to be playing up until the next thing that you're releasing. So, it's a little bittersweet, but I do like that, if they can really settle into this new release cadence. Again, this is the first time they've done this release cadence. This is the first time they're making away with Living World since, ever. I mean, this is the first time we don't have Living World, guys. So that's 11 years now, that 10 years, 10 and a half years, whatever, that we've had this Living World. So this is still new. And like I said, I'm giving ArenaNet at least a year. I'm giving ArenaNet until the next mini expansion to kind of really say this failed or this is not good or whatever, right? The first mini expansion that we're gonna get, and its contents, and the release after that, maybe, to see really, is this a good thing? Have they really figured it out? Do they really know how to do these like annual release things now? We'll see, guys. So this right here, so roadmap, I kind of want to talk about it. So yeah, so up until now, while I do have my, I talked about like, oh, this kind of overall, I really think being transparent and talking to us and telling us what's happening, and even patting yourself on the back is good, because it's gonna boost your morale. It's gonna boost our morale. It's gonna really just, and putting everything kind of in perspective is a good idea. And kind of being transparent on what what you're doing with the lead specialization and that sort of stuff, right? What the content is gonna be like and stuff is great. And the roadmap that we've been waiting on is this. And it's very disappointing, guys. It's again, the roadmaps have kind of been like shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, which when they first started doing roadmaps and they were talking about, we're going to be doing roadmaps and we're going to be talking about roadmaps and this is going to be the huge thing, they wanted to really it was received really well, and they wanted to be transparent, and they really wanted to show us what's going to come next. Now, and it's kind of, that's fizzled out, and that's ArenaNet, right? They do this all the time, where they talk about something that they're gonna do, and then they do it for like a year, and then it fizzles out, and then they're like, okay, well, we know that this didn't really work out, but we're gonna do this, and then they do it for a year, and then it kind of fizzles out, and then they're like, okay, well, we know this doesn't work out, but we're gonna do it this time, and then it kind of fizzles out. And the roadmaps, while roadmaps aren't content in game, it's the same situation here. So they started with roadmaps. They gave us like 4 panels on like, every couple months, this is what's coming out, or like what, sometimes it was even like on a monthly thing where they're like, this month this, next month that, this, and then it went to like, in 2 months we have this, 2 months after that, 2 months after that, 2 months after that. And then it went to like, okay, we're gonna do 4 months of like update, but 2 of those months in between, you're giving us 4 things, and then 2 of those, this was the last roadmap, were like just a festival. And it's like, okay, cool, it's like, that's not very exciting. We've had these festivals for 10 years now. These aren't nothing special. These aren't nothing where I'm like, oh my god, it's a Dragon Bash festival. Like, yeah, cool, we've had it. You don't add that many new things to it for me to get super excited about it. Is it great for new players? Absolutely. I think for new players this is really, really cool, but I think that these studio updates are more targeted towards us veteran players, right? Because I don't think that that's necessarily for new people, because half of these new people don't even know what any of this stuff means. So it's like, the roadmap situation, I really am not happy with. And at this point, I think they should just get rid of it. Like, if you're gonna do this with roadmaps, just get rid of it. Let's look at it. Just so I can kind of, make an example of what I'm talking about. So, End of Dragons update. Okay, quarterly update, right? We know that the second half of What Lies Within is coming out, and we have the Fractal Dungeon and Challenge Mode coming. We know this, right? Then we have festivals. We have 1 festival coming, Dragon Bash Festival, which, again, is probably one of the weakest festivals, I think, in terms of content that's there to do, right? I think Winter's Day and Halloween are probably the top ones in terms of content, but that's because they were the first ones to be introduced, and there was a lot of, I think there was a lot of development time that went into those, and then over the years they have just really built on those, and they've become really solid, like, content things. Even, like, Super Adventure Box now is there, you know? And not that I dislike Dragon Bash, don't get me wrong. Dragon Bash was something that, the original Dragon Bash, I remember in, like, original Alliance Arch, for Guild Wars 2 was super fun, and I have these fond memories of playing Dragon Bash, and just, you know, the music and the whole idea of Dragon Bash was, like, really cool. So I do like Dragon Bash. It's not that I dislike it, but making this part of your big spring roadmap, woo, right? Also, I will talk about specifically spring. And then gameplay systems, skills, and balance updates. We already know this. Visual effect filtering feature, which I think they'll talk about more in detail, and then World Rewards updates. So this is bare bones. This is even more bare bones than the last one. Like I said, it's fizzling out. There is not a lot on here. But they're only giving us a spring map, like a spring 2023 roadmap. They're not giving us any further. Like, summer, like, this is pretty much just, so, because it says spring/summer, but then they're only talking about spring. Is this going to be all the way until the end of, like, August, September-ish, and then we're going to get, like, a new one? They're not even putting dates on it, so they're not even telling us when these things are happening. So, it's a little, I mean, we can go through here. They actually do give us dates. They actually do give us dates. So never mind. I'm wrong on that. Never mind. But yeah, it's a little because we already knew this right here is part of the old roadmap. This is not something new. The fractal dungeon, I think, or that might be on the old one as well, I don't know, but this feels like this is older stuff. So then the only new stuff on the roadmap is actually the third panel, because we knew Dragon Bash was coming. We know it's an annual event. We knew it was coming. This is not something revelating. We're like, oh my god, huge update, right? Like I said. So the only new things on here is the gameplay systems panel, which has skills and balances, which we already know there is a balance update coming tomorrow, and then the day after, or not the day after tomorrow, but then in, like, sometime in May, I think, right? So yeah, it's coming sometime in May, I think, is the big one. Or June? Is it June? Early June? I think it's early June. Whatever. Visual effect filtering, which again is kind of not a huge deal. Again, it's not a huge content thing. And then what was the World Rewards update, which we don't, you know, again, I think they talk about it a lot, yeah, down here. So, again, so let's kind of go through here. Profession updates, you know, they have this, the skills and balance updates. So they're doing one with just over 100 changes. So they're trying to say it's it's on the lighter side, but it still does have 100 changes. Oh, June 27th is the large one. This is the first large one since the one we got in February, right? In February we had the big one. We had a big one, I think, right? So, still, I think having these on a consistent basis is important. So I'm glad to see this happening. Having this one be a smaller one kind of sucks. But I'm excited to see what we're going to get in June. So, because this one that we're getting right now has some interesting changes, but you know, I'm one of those people that really wants stuff shaken up. I really want, pardon me, I really want to see some huge changes on that. And, hopefully June will bring that for us. So, and then the new update, so they're talking about, so this is really interesting. So I think, so let's kind of read through it. The next update for Guild Wars 2 arrives May 23rd, concluding a story that began earlier this year. So they're concluding the story. Does that mean there is long-term, like, effects, ripples for the next story, for the next mini expansion, like those types of things? Maybe. I kind of made a little bit of video on it. We haven't even been introduced to, I think, whoever the big bad guy is, which is, I think, Kanaxai? Are we going to be introduced to him and then completely take care of him? Like, is this going to be like a Joker situation where it's like, oh yeah, 3 releases and boom, we're done with him? Would kind of suck, but maybe that's going to have some, like, maybe there's going to be, like, some kind of overarching, like, story that's being told there, you know, like, some kind of narrative that's being built there. Together with your allies, tackle a new story, and a new capstone encounter. Capstone encounter? Okay. For the Gala Delve meta event that will have your squad breaking through an old tunnel to the surface. So we're still meta event, but And this is, and then put an end to the demons of the depths. So then they talk about this next part is really, really interesting to me, and it's something that goes back to where I talk right here, where the release of What Lies Beneath wasn't that good. I think that's the reason why they worded the question the way they did it, is because they're dressing it here in like a way that they're not saying that What Lies Beneath and Gyaladelv kind of sucked, but they're kind of saying like, hey, we're adding things to the map that should have been there before, but we're gonna make it like part of the new thing that we're releasing, which is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, yes, because this is the first time that ArenaNet is going back to add things to a map that they have released, like major things that they have released. For example, adventures. So let's read through it. Once the danger has been cleared out of Gyaladelv, the map will be will enter a more peaceful state. So they're actually letting us explore the map more. Okay, good. Several new adventures will become available. Adventures haven't been added in a long time, and people have been asking, including our first cooperative adventure featuring siege turtles. So they're literally doing new adventures, guys. And I'm like, oh my god, this is something where I'm like, this is great. Like, you know, they realized that Gyaladelv was kind of bare bones, and they're like, we want to add new things. I don't know if that was the original plan. I think I would really like that if this was on purpose. I would have liked them to tell us about it in detail and really say the initial release will be focusing on a meta-based release, and it's just a meta event, and that's all you do in the map. And then once the second half releases, we're gonna enhance the experience of letting you explore the map, doing adventures, and finding little things here and there, and doing little things here and there, and doing other things. You know, where we updates will share updates with new Siege Turtle, Jade Bots, and Skiff Adventures, right? So it's like if they had told us like, hey, we're just gonna do a bare bones like meta event map, but then the next release, guys, we're gonna add a bunch of new content to the maps, and to maps that are part of this release, which is like, you know, End of Dragons is like, this is the End of Dragons era, right? So we're adding things to End of Dragons maps. Like, I think people would have been a lot less like doom and gloom about it, including me, you know, because I'm like, okay, cool, this is really stalking from the shadows to strike unsuspecting adventurers. You'll also start running into Oni. So the Oni are spreading, like, they're updating End of Dragons maps is what they're saying, which they realized, again, they're not saying that they kind of sucked, these maps, or that they were lackluster in some way or whatever, but they're going back to adding things to it, which is great, and I wish they would make a bigger deal out of that. I think that's really good. Alongside new content, we've got a plethora of new rewards. Obviously, you know, we're going to get to bevy of treasure chests and achievements awaiting your triumph. So we're adding new treasure chests and achievements to Gyaladelv. New collections, of course, as always. And we're getting a new armor set. Again, you know, put that on bigger, like, boom. Like, make a whole section that says, like, rewards or something. Because I think, like, armor sets, you know, that's really good. Like, I don't know if it's a whole, it says armor skins, it doesn't say armor sets. So but yeah, I mean, even some armor skins are awesome. I like it. This will be last story up. So this is interesting, I think, because people talked about how we're moving away from Cantha as, like, you know, where the content is going and stuff. And I think at first I was like, nah, I think ArenaNet is going to do more maps in, like, Cantha, because there's a lot of, like, a bunch of stuffs on the map that haven't been uncovered. You know, we have, like, Karen Peak and, like, Turtle Highlands and more Echovald. Like, Echovald isn't, like, centered, you know, on the thing. So I was thinking there was going to be more, and maybe that was the initial plan, but I think that has shifted, and I think right here it tells us that I think they're really telling us, like, yeah, so I don't know if this is the part, maybe we can, no, I think there's a part where they hint more as, like, we're going away from Cantha. I think this isn't it. There's a part later on where they talk about that. This release will be the last story update in the release cycle. Keep an eye out for hints towards the future, and look forward to the upcoming fractal where you can peer further into the shadows under the Jade Sea. So they're doing a fractal that has to do with under the Jade Sea. So they're probably going to do like the Deep from Guild Wars 1 was like an elite mission that you could do. They're probably going to do a fractal that's like in that sense where you actually go and defeat Kanaxai. I'm betting you right now that's probably what it is. I think we're going to see us going back 250 years, and we're playing the characters from Guild Wars 1 that are going into the deep, defeating Kanaxai. That's probably what it is, and I love it. I love everything about it. I can't wait for it. I can't wait for this new fractal. I love it. I'm really excited for it. So this could, you know, or it could be something completely different. I don't know, but that's what it sounds like to me. Because everything so far, as I've done in the last couple of videos that I've talked about the Jade Sea, I think everything is hinting towards Kanaxai. The way that the haze behaves, the introduction of the Oni, going into the deep, I think is really giving us like, oh, this is happening, you know? Dragon Bash is coming. Yay, cool. They really, like, literally not even telling us anything new. I think they're literally not adding anything new to Dragon Bash because they're like, ooh, Dragon Bash is coming. Cool, awesome. The effects thing they talk about, I don't think, you know, they're talking about how you can hide the different effects, blah, blah, blah. You know, visuals and stuff. I think they're talking about probably like, I think they're talking about like how people are like annoyed with like infusions and stuff. That's probably what it is. I'm not gonna really read through this, but then they talk about like, so the world versus world reward thing they're talking about. So the access skirmish claim tickets and emblems of the Avenger. This specifically, I have a crap ton of those. I'm like, what did I do with these? I'm keeping those, but they're giving us something to get for this. Even if I can get like just material bags or something for it, I'd be happy. Just because I just have them and I have nothing to do with them. I'm like, skirmish tickets, I still use them because I'm kind of like working towards like different things, so I need those. But you know, weapon set, you know, if I can get like weapons for that, I'm okay with that. So a compound version, so there's a new infusion. You know, again, I talked about how infusions has become such like, this is the thing to get now, right? I think in World of Warcraft, and I could be wrong, World of Warcraft for a long time had like mount skins that were like, oh, you want to, or not mount skins, but like, I guess it would be just mounts, were like the reward thing in a lot of early dungeons and stuff. I don't know if that's still the thing. I don't know if it's like, that's still like the prestige rewards that you can get in World of Warcraft, where you're like, oh yeah, I have this really cool mount because I got, you know, RNGs is blessed me in this raid or whatever, right? I don't know, but infusions has kind of become that, right? It's like the staple. It's like the thing to get is like infusions. There's a bunch of other things that I feel like could kind of take that place. I've talked about, like, there's other novelty things, like specifically novelty things, like I talked about combat tonics. They could make some really cool combat tonics, and I'm not saying like, hey, I want to look like my Trin or Anka, which are, you know, those are playable races. I can make an Anka lookalike person, or I can make a lookalike my Trin and just play a Revenant that looks like my Trin. You know, it's stuff like that where I'm just like, man, that's not, you know, I'm talking about like looking like other races that are not playable, right? We have Kodan. Like, I want to see a Tengu combat. Is there a Tengu combat? I don't think there's a Tengu combat tonic. Like, there's so many weird like combat tonics that I would love to see actually be utilized in the game. You know, so that would be like one that I would want Arena to kind of start focusing on as like a reward thing. But, you know, that just might be me. So, Canthan themed Fractal and Dungeon and Professional updates. So that's June 27th is going to be the big release, guys. That's going to be the huge... This is going to be what's going to set the game for the next few months in, like, a specific direction, right? Because that's going to be huge. So they're doing a new Fractal. Wait a little bit longer to hear the juicy details. I love it. I love everything about it. We started development. How would you share a quick note? So they're talking about how they're kind of doing a little bit differently from Sunkwell Peak. They're trying to do less waiting. Is there a lot of waiting in Sunkwell Peak? I feel like there's a lot of like just... I don't know. Well, you have the bridges that kind of move, or the stairs that kind of move once you defeat like an enemy, and you have to like jump over to get to the next point and stuff. But that didn't really bother me. I feel like there's other fractals that have a lot more waiting that are happening. Like, what about the one with the Grawl? Like, I feel like there's a lot of waiting that you have to do there. I don't know. Um, but you know, I like the shorter, sweet fractals. You know, where you go in and you don't have like a giant journey, but it's just like a small little like, oh, okay, boom, done. Like a couple and fights and bosses, and you know, you get some Desa stuff, and you go away. Like I like the quicker ones. More so than the really long ones. Like Twilight Oasis is such a nightmare. I hate it. It's so bad. It's so long, and it's just like I hate it. One of our goals was upcoming to deliver with tighter gameplay experience while still providing story content, which is nice. I really, really love story content. I've made a video if you guys want to see on my channel. There is um, a concept. Like I made 7 concepts for fractals about like, you know, spanning the past of Guild Wars 2 and like other ideas that I had. So if you guys want to see what I think we should see as fractals, because I still, honestly, that video is like quite old now, but that is what I would probably still like if I were to sit down and say like what fractals do I want to see. Probably that same list of 7. So I think that still holds true. So balance updates. So this is very interesting, and this is something where I'm like super excited. And this is something where we'll talk about this right here in a second. So, improving the feeling of moment-to-moment gameplay for many boon support skills. So they're talking about, you know, they want more flexibility in their utility choice. I think specifically what they mean by this is like, you know, how like what is it? Is it Quickness Herald? It's not Alacrity, right? It's Quickness Herald, where you have to like the facets, you have to just kind of like, you have to use them like on cool, like whenever they're off cooldown, just use them, and you don't even get any benefit off of the like the passives that you get from having it like just going, because you want to pump out like quickness or alacrity or whatever it is, right? Again, I'm not huge on those like end gamey stuff, and Revenant is not something I actively play right now, so I, you know, you must excuse me for not knowing exactly, but I think that's what they're talking about, where it's like, well, we kind of, you know, that's not really what we want. So I think, you know, in quickness and alacrity, they've kind of been trying to spread that out amongst all the other things, and they're talking about this in a minute as well. But they want other specializations and other like they want every profession to have like a way to provide quickness and a way to provide alacrity, right? And kind of like have that be like something that they can spread across all the, you know, all the professions. So and I love that. I think it's great because it, you know, it gives you options of playing the different professions. You can play different playstyles, which is awesome. Introducing alternate playstyles for some specializations, including quickness support Deadeye. Did anyone, like, I think people called this. I think people were really wanting Deadeye to get like a you know, I mean, this is not support, but it's a quickness support. But I think someone called that, and I think I remember reading that. So that's really interesting. I like Deadeye. Deadeye's fun. So quickness support, that'll be fun to see. And damage builds, this is huge. So for those of you that don't know, I make really weird niche builds that don't work really. I have like a berserker themed water elementalist, and I have a berserker druid and stuff, and they suck. I mean, you know, and the water elementalist is a tempest, you know, and it sucks because specifically druid and tempest are just so support based. They don't work as damage. They you know, I really wish that a damage dealing druid worked, but it doesn't. It does not work. And seeing that, I love Tempest. I'm not huge on Elementalist, but if I were to play an Elementalist, it would probably be a Tempest. I really love the overloads. I like the simplicity of it. I think that Weaver and Catalyst are a little bit more to like playing the keyboard, like too many button presses and too many like swapping around, and there's just too much going on. I'm more of like a super chill player, and I think Tempest is like exactly perfect for me if I play an Elementalist. So seeing a damage build for Tempest, Oh, it's great. I really love it. So I can't wait to see a damage dealing druid. That's going to be amazing. That's awesome. And then tuning underutilized. So I've talked about this quite a bit, and we talked about like um, underwater weapons earlier, quite in detail. But underutilized weapons and solidifying their roles within the profession. So there is one skill, if you're still with me after like an hour and 13 minutes of doing this video, or you're just kind of skipping through, I want you to look up Freezing Gust. And it's the joke. I posted on social media about it. I talk about it on my streams. I talk about it on my Discord channel. We talk about it all the time. Freezing Gust is probably objectively the worst, one of the worst, if not the worst skill, then one of the worst skills in Guild Wars 2. It literally is like a 25-second recharge. It does like on level 80 does like 500 damage or something, and it applies like chill for like 5 seconds or something. It's like one of the worst skills ever. It's really, really bad, and apparently there's a bug on it where it does less damage than it's actually telling you on the tooltip. So it's even bugged, and it's only seen one update in 2013, which was that the aftercast was reduced by like 0.35 seconds, and that's the only update it's seen since the release of the game. It is the worst. I think it's such a terrible skill. It's so bad. But even other focus, like Elementalist focus, because we're talking this. I don't know if I said, but it's a water Elementalist focus, water attunement focus 4 skill. But I think that specifically the Elementalist focus skills, all of them kind of need some love. And right here they're talking about Ranger Sword as a mobile power damage weapon. It's something that they've already gone through and made changes to it, and I like the changes that they've made, but it just doesn't compare to Great Sword, right? So they going back and bringing some of these weapons up to the standard of other weapons is a great idea. I think it's something that the game really, really needs, and I'm a huge advocate for them really making some of these weapons feel better. Removing additional skill type specific recharge reduction traits and rolling them into the base. I love it. I love everything about it, because I think the way that they're moving with the game, this is exactly what we need. Because when, for example, we're looking at Reaper, for example, right? They're updating Reaper right now, and you have a trait where your shouts, I think, do like more damage or something, or they steal life, or they create life force, or whatever that top trait is in Reaper. I don't know what it's called, but it's the top trait and the minor in Reaper, and it deals, I think it has like a recharge reduction, doesn't it? Like 20% for shouts. So when you make a Reaper that uses shouts, you have to use that skill, right? Because it is a huge quality of life to your whole utility bar, your utility skill bar. So taking that away gives you more options, because I do like actually the middle skill, which has it's the chill, and if you like attack a chilled foe and you chill them again or something, they have like a chill explosion that happens. It's really cool, and it's something that I can really see like a build concept be put on, where like you kind of build around chill. So I love that. I love it. So long-range development initiatives, core game updates. So they're talking about how this team that has been working on like quality of life improvements. So they're doing that team that's doing the visual effect filtering that we kind of skipped over this part over here, and you can go back and read that yourself. But they're kind of going to be jumping onto once they're done with this, they're going to be looking at existing core game rewards. Intriguing, right? This feature is still many months away. I don't know what they really mean by core game reward system. Are they talking about like the things that like dynamic events reward, or like maybe even map completion rewards, or like how we get the bonus chests from like doing events? Maybe integrating those into just automatically going into your inventory, or automatically being part of the dynamic event system or something. I would really love that, because the dynamic event system gives you like karma, and it gives you like coin, right? And I think gives you like experience, but obviously it gives you experience. I don't know, is that I think, but I would love to see maybe the blues and greens that we get from, like, doing that stuff, like kind of integrating that into it. You automatically get it, so I don't constantly have to, open those blinking chests down there. It's just an extra step that I feel like is just kind of like annoying. So maybe automatically having that as like a reward thing. I don't know. So they're literally saying, like, this is all you're gonna hear of it for many months, and that's it, right? The only thing that they're gonna maybe look at is like the mega server queue thing that they just released, and doing bug fixing that as that comes out. So then they're talking about infrastructure. So they're literally saying that we changed from DirectX 9 to 11, and they're now exploring. So they have to remove the last of the code of DirectX 9. That's the first step now, talking about that item in particular, so to say. That once that is done, they then will look into graphical updates and improvements overall, like how the game runs and stuff like that. The same was done with the Chromium and Bread. So it's pretty much like they're looking into the new systems that they've implemented. They're now looking into how they can utilize those systems to their full, like full capabilities, and really just like make it really just be worthwhile having invested the money and time on having these systems, which is a good idea. I mean, that's really nice. World versus World. So there's still, a kind of, again, I don't know, this is like rehash stuff that we've heard over World versus World, where they're like, oh, we got to do, some of the stuff I don't really know. It's like all technical terms, like the server plumbing needed to support alliances, client data management to be specific, implementing the first pass of the alliance management interface, and fixing bugs related to matchmaking. So this is still, I think these are the issues that they've been having with this for a while now. I think this is still something where these are the same issues that have been persistent throughout, and they're still working on those, is pretty much what they're saying. But they're pretty much saying that they're doing more betas, which they've already announced this months ago. This is not news. None of this is new. Okay, none of this is news. None of this is anything revelating. But they're pretty much saying, like, hey, this is still something we're working on. We're going to be making tests. We're going to be doing betas. We're going to be doing this stuff. I don't think they're really giving us specific, inviting guilds, kicking guilds, leaving. So they're still wanting to do... alliances is still a huge thing, which I love. Prior to that, they're doing, so pretty much that. And then expansion 4, mini expansion 1, pretty much, right? We already know there's, you already know all there is to know. That's clearly a lie, because if you're already working on the content release after the first mini expansion, your mini expansion is already completely sold. There is more to know about this expansion that you're not telling us, which is fine, but I'm saying you already know all there is to know. That's false. That's clearly just wrong, because what they mean to say here is you already know everything we want you to know about the next expansion, right? So but we'd be remiss not included in the list as one of our top priorities. Obviously, we already figured that out. Each team in the team is working hard. Complete a whole line of fearsome baddies for the commander, and they have a little picture of these. They look, so to me, so this arm right here, I kind of looked at this. This was one of the huge things that kind of popped out to me, is this whole figure right here, and I'm kind of gonna theory craft here a little bit. This looks like a Jade mech, right? This looks like something that the engineer would summon, right? But this arm in particular, if you look at it, looks like an Oni arm. Like, we recently got the Oni arm thing. So is this something, because I made a video recently about the Jade and how it could influence the haze in the Jade and the Jade powered tech. Like, could the haze that's in the Jade influence the Jade tech and take it over and maybe do something there? That's still something that I feel like, looking at just this guy right here, is a huge possibility, right? Where it's like, oh, it's starting to grow like demonic arms and legs, and it's just been overtaken. But then also, when we look at this, for example, this looks like a destroyer to me, with the claw here and the like scorpion-like tail that comes out. That's very like this guy too, with the, looks very destroyer-esque. This looks like one of the magic floaty destroyers. they all have like humanoid, like long, like alien looking legs, right? That are like, I don't know if this is concept art for one enemy or an enemy type or a new faction or what. This is kind of cool with the like weird, like we're probably gonna see one that looks exactly like that, because you know, knowing ArenaNet, they probably love the design of this thing, so we're probably gonna see an enemy that looks exactly like that with the like headpiece that has like a like almost like pincers coming out or whatever, and it's you know, it has like almost the Ice Brood Norn body, right, where it's just kind of like looks like almost like a gorilla-esque skeleton. This again kind of makes me think of Oni, like demonic stuff. Like some of the stuff makes me think of demons, and some of it makes me think of like how it's disconnected, right? They're not connected with each other. It makes me think of like destroyers, so they're like rocks kind of magically put together and given like some sort of sentience or whatever, like a hive mind, whatever. So I think there's like demon. It's obviously not destroyers, but maybe the destroyers that you know, maybe the destroyers that were like left over after Primordus. A lot of the when the Elder Dragons died, a lot of the like enemies kind of were left behind, right? The Risen became the Unchained kind of, and they're still all around. They're not like free all of a sudden. They're just still kind of corrupted. So maybe these are being taken over by some demonic force now or something. I don't know. Who knows? There's a lot of things you can speculate on, but this is not much to go on, and I'm kind of sad they're not giving us more, but that's just how it is. You know, they're kind of giving us more of a like the next few months kind of release thing. They haven't even talked about like anything. I mean, they're literally saying spring, and then after summer they're probably going to give us another update of these. You know, I wish they had these more often, but it's a really long one, and there's a lot of stuff going on in here. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I've been talking about this for like an hour and a half now. Again, if you guys have been hanging out with me this whole time, I really appreciate it. If you guys haven't subscribed, I would really appreciate that as well. Leave a comment. What do you guys think? What do you think is gonna happen? Are you guys happy with what's happening? Do you guys agree with some of the stuff that I said? Do you guys disagree? I would love to hear the people that disagree, because I'm a type of person, you know, if you present good evidence to me, I will definitely change my mind. So I'm just, you know, spitballing this stuff. You know, I pretty much recorded this right after it came out, so you know, it's not something that I've had hours or days even to like think about or whatever. So but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you guys haven't checked out my other stuff, go do that, and I will see you guys some other time. Bye guys.